welcome back. I am finally sitting down and doing the video on anger. So a little bit of a funny antidote before I get into the facts of this is I've actually recorded this video early on, and in my learning process, I totally messed up the video and lost everything. Quite ironically, I have been holding on to a lot of frustration and anger about losing my anger video. I have been kind of putting it off, and I felt like that was a good way to start this video anyway, because anger is very natural. It occurs for many reasons. It occurs in many different ways, and I thought it was a little bit funny to get so frustrated and angry about my anger video getting lost. Welcome to the topic of anger. And I really enjoy doing this work, so I am very excited to actually be sitting down and doing this video for a second time. So the truth about anger is I like to debunk some things before I even start to get into this process with people, because I've already brought up the subject and I'm sure you've already started having opinions or flashbacks for yourself or others regarding interactions with anger. So the first thing I want to debunk is the emotion of anger is not destructive in of itself. Typically, our responses and our reactions to what anger is more about the behaviors, either that ourselves or others have had in interactions. It's little to do with the actual sensations and feelings of anger. So that's the first thing. The next thing I like to debunk is why we have anger. So as with all emotions, anger is a messenger of something. But what's interesting about anger is that it's what we call secondary emotion. It really just means that it's not typically the primary thing happening. So something else is happening, and then the response that we have to that is anger. So I am going to put some books down below in regards to how to understand emotions in general. I think it's really helpful to elaborate on the topic that we're talking about, because all emotions have messages and messengers and come up for a reason. Typically, we're not feeling something just for no reason. Even if we can't derive meaning from whatever it is that we're feeling, it's there for something. And with anger, a lot of the times, because we feel like we're not quite understanding or we're responding to something else, a lot of the times it's very easy to deflect that, meaning it's coming from out there. It's not generated from inside of me because we're responding to something else. So we put a lot of blame into our anger, that like this person, this situation, these circumstances is the reason for my anger. And so we're going to debunk that a bit, but being able to take ownership of any of our emotions, but specifically anger, because anger can be destructive in ourselves, it can be destructive outside of ourselves. And so when we figure out a balance and a way to work with it, it no longer has to be destructive, it can be informative, and then we can make choices based on that information. One of the things that I do is I use a lot of imagery, and one of the images that I very much think represent is fire. And fire is helpful, right? We could cook our food. If you've ever sat around a campfire, it can be a source of light, a source of protection from bugs or maybe even other critters. It can be a place where you gather and share stories, and for many, many, many generations and times that's really what our ancestors were doing. They would sit around the fire and, create meals, tell stories, share information over that fire. So there can be a source of well-being and protection with fire. The same as with anger. So when we get out of the judgment of anger behaviors and we start to just break down what is anger, there's very much a protective and really providing information source of anger. So a lot of the times the information that anger comes with is injustice, boundary violations, discomfort, when we are feeling like we're being pressured, or the discomfort from not even knowing what to do. So frustration, irritability, things not working the way we thought that they should or would work, and then that building up, very much like the video getting deleted and being so upset and angry that I haven't been able to sit down and do it again. So these are all the messages and the things that are happening for us. There's also, quite honestly, feelings of powerlessness, feeling out of control, feeling devalued and disconnected. So if you haven't checked out my pillars of vulnerability, I will also put the link below. All of those things do create any kind of emotion, but specifically to anger, power and control. Really, when we're feeling powerless and out of control, that anger, that fire energy, there can be a bit of it to inspire us to make changes. So let's say someone's violating your boundaries and you start to get really angry and you've watched this video, so you're aware, hey, this is what's going on. So instead of just reacting the same old way that you have, what you do is you say, okay, obviously this isn't okay for me. Obviously this boundary is being crossed. So what can I do? What actionable steps? What do I have in my control, and what can I do to empower myself to have a boundary around this, or have a conversation with the person violating my boundary? So that part of the anger energy can help us move towards a solution. Where things get out of control, similarly to fire, is if you have, so I give a couple different scenarios here. You have someone else who comes and dumps gasoline on your fire, or puts something in your fire that makes it feel unmanageable and not able to be controlled or be safe. So I have many times been around where people think it's fun to throw certain things in fire and it becomes dangerous or risky very quickly. There's also these other times where we fuel our own fire. So the 3 ways that we fuel our own fire are with judgments, and judgments can break down into a lot of different things. So there's internal judgment, and there can be shame wrapped up in that internal judgment. There's external judgment, which can be judging ourselves or others in comparison. So, oh, I can't do this, so I'm frustrated that I can't do the same thing that that person can do over there. Or we're judging others and getting angry of, I would have done that so much better. They're incompetent. They're an idiot. They can't do this. What's wrong with them? And now we're fueling that fire and creating anger. The easiest way to realize what you're doing with judgments is to just start practicing the mindfulness techniques, pausing, noticing, oh, hey, that's a judgment, or I'm being really judgmental today. I wonder what that's about. The important thing is, don't judge your judging. That's extra fuel, extra fire. Now you're burning yourself and others all at the same time. So don't judge your judging, just notice it, just kind of gently call it out and be like, okay, what is this really about? Then we have blaming. So I already kind of touched upon the myth that something else out there is in charge of my feelings, my anger. So what's really important here is we're not dismissing that someone else might be doing something. So again, if someone else is hurting you, if someone else is, violating your boundaries, if someone else is even being abusive or taking advantage of you, that part is not okay. But what we do when we blame is we shift our power. So now when I say, well, that person's actions or response is making me feel this way, they need to stop so that I can feel okay. What I have done is I've given them the power. They have to change in order for me to be okay, or for me to stop feeling the way I'm feeling. That's what we're talking about here. So when we blame, when we point fingers and say, you're the cause of this, you have to stop this, we have disempowered ourselves. We have maybe given a person who's already being abusive more power over us, and we're not getting to a solution. So the opposite of blaming is accountability. So whether we're holding ourselves accountable of, hey, this is what I'm responsible for, this is what I need to do in this moment, or whether we go and try and hold that other person accountable, or get other people, if we don't feel safe to do that, get other people involved who can hold that person accountable. So it's not always on us to hold, especially if we're talking about abuse of any kind of nature or domestic violence. That's not the time that the person who's being abused or oppressed, they're not the ones that are going to be able to hold that person accountable. But being able to find some resources to get accountability is important. Finally, another way that we fuel this anger is through assumptions. So we assume that this person or this situation is either going to go a certain way or they already know something. I talk about this a lot with clients who are married or coupled, and they think this person's been with me for 25, 40 years, and they should just know. They should just know that that pisses me off and not do it. Again, we can ask for boundaries. We can ask for accountability. Maybe we have had several different types of discussions. And when we take back our power and what we can control in the situation, and we come from that place having a conversation with this person, and also realizing that one of the questions I say is, you don't even know what's going on for you most of the time. We're trying to build awareness within ourselves to even know, oh, this is what's going on for me. So then to have an expectation that someone else is going to just automatically know or be able to remember. Maybe they know, but how many times do you forget things, even for yourself? So to have an expectation that this other person is just automatically going to be able to know and be responsible for might not be exactly accurate. And making those assumptions about what should be happening. So should is an indicator that we are holding an expectation. And expectations are not necessarily inherently bad, but we have to understand that we have an expectation for two reasons. One, then we can say, hey, I have this expectation, and the other person can say, well, I'm never going to be able to meet that expectation, or I will try, but I may not get there exactly. And we also have to understand that for ourselves, when we know we have an expectation that we're holding, that they may not be met, and then how do we proceed, or how do we want to move forward? So again, expectations aren't necessarily the culprit of bad behavior or bad responses, but if we don't manage them, they can be. I quite literally had someone I worked with years and years and years ago who finally came in one day when I was doing anger management with her, and she's like, I think I finally have gotten it. no one woke up today and signed a contract that said they were going to uphold all of my expectations about what I think should and should not be happening. And that's really what it is we can know those things, but we can't assume that everyone's just going to wake up and meet our expectations every moment of every day, or that we are even going to be able to do that for ourselves. So these are the things that fuel that internal anger, and trying to understand that piece of it also helps expand our circuit board a bit to just be able to breathe in a moment and, again, tap into our resources so that we can get through a moment where we might have a really intense wave of anger or rage. I think a final piece of what I'm just going to talk about today in this video is the idea that accountability and impact are very important to consider. So again, whether it is our responses that we're trying to work with or other people's anger that we are kind of frustrated or done working with, accountability is a really important piece. So when I work with people who are struggling with anger behaviors, well, by the time we get to this place in the process of the program, what I'm asking them to do is understand what's the impact, and not just what you think the impact is, but what have other people told you about how your anger is making them feel. And if you're on a receiving end, have you expressed that to that person? Again, if it doesn't feel safe, don't do anything that doesn't feel safe. But maybe it's time to just say, hey, like, you can't just yell and scream at me about this, because when you do that, I'm feeling this. We need to work on that. And that's part of the accountability. But when we don't know the impact of something, truly know it, and a lot of people come in assuming that they know, and I ask them to go back and ask directly, how has my anger impacted you? How has it changed our relationship? I need to know so that I can go work on this. So that's the first part of working towards accountability. The other thing about accountability is, and some people might not like this, but stop saying I'm sorry. I don't think anybody actually wants to hear the words I'm sorry. And I don't mean don't apologize or be accountable. Just stop saying I'm sorry. Especially women, we are conditioned to apologize for everything. And I don't know about everyone else out there, but I know that even when I'm walking in the grocery store and bump into someone, my old conditioned response was, oh, I'm so sorry. I now have worked on that for myself and say, pardon me, excuse me, or, I didn't mean to bump into you. So I hold myself accountable, or I make a statement that understand I have impacted someone around me and I am not apologizing. So we apologize for so many things. Think about how many times you might personally say, oh, I'm sorry, didn't mean that, I'm sorry. Especially in relationships, in interpersonal relationships or work relationships or wherever you're having these issues. If you're constantly saying, I'm sorry, it's lost meaning. You might as well be saying cheese bread at this point. Cheese bread, because that's the impact of it. People aren't really taking that to heart, and it's not really coming from your heart when you're saying that. So what I work on with people is accountability. So accountability is, I see it, I own it, I am acknowledging what I need to do about it, so solve it, and then follow through on that. So I see that I have done this thing that has impacted you. I know that that is not the right thing, because this is what I'm doing to work on that thing and how I can make this a better situation or a better conversation. And this is what me following through is going to look like. That is a true accountability statement. And that is what you need. So if your anger has been hurting people, knock off the I'm sorry's, apologize, sure. But if your apology is, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that, that was wrong of me to do, you're only getting like a third or a fourth of it correct. You need to do all of the steps and communicate that to the other person, not just say it to yourself, so that that person can also say, oh, hey, you said that, you understood this and that this is what you'd be doing to work on it. And this is what follow through looks like. And I haven't seen that. Can you give me more examples, or maybe give me what you're currently doing for yourself so that that doesn't happen again? So then they have empowerment to hold you accountable to what you are actually trying to work on. So this is how we start to repair relationships or repair situations where anger behaviors have actually ruptured something and impacted people in a harmful way. So there's so much more to anger and how I explain it, and it breaks down into several different places. There's a lot to do with the brain. So again, I would tell you to go look at my brain video in regards to how do we regulate ourselves and work. Oh, there's Gypsycat wanted to come join us and say goodbye. Just close out today and say, anger is not something. So I wanted to close out today with a short recap and just say that anger is not something that has to be destructive. It's informative and it's protective. So my questions for you are, what does healthy anger look like for you? And how are you relating to anger? How does it reside inside of you? So maybe work with those two questions. Remember that there's different messages and meanings to what's coming up in us, and that we don't want to say I'm sorry. We want accountability. We want to understand what is happening and what we have control of, specific for those of us who are responding in anger or impacting others with our anger. So thank you for joining today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. If this is something that you want me to follow up on, or you have more questions about, please let me know. I'm happy to do a part 2. And I hope wherever you are well. And until next time, we'll see you later. And Gypsycat is definitely loving his cameos. Bye, guys.